Thanks for listening to the Healthy Church Podcast with Larry Barker and Drew Klein.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on the Healthy Church Podcast. My name is Drew Klein, here with Larry Barker. Larry, it's good to see you today, brother. Why don't you introduce our guests and our topic for the day?
Well, we're real excited about it because when I came into the role with our tribe of church planting, we realized we were going to have to get some systems in place. We did not have a very high survivability rate after 5 years on our church planting efforts, and I ran across a guy by the name of Tom Niebel with Converge at that time, and he was telling me about when you add coaching into your systems. We had some assessment. We were working on that. We had a lot of training, which most groups have some kind of training, but we really didn't have coaching. And when he said, when you add coaching to the dynamic, it increases the survivability rate to 85 and 95%. Man, I was leaning in. And then through a mutual friend, was introduced to Dave DeVry. And then Dave made me aware of who's joining us today, Keith Webb, and who wrote the coach model and has the coach training that I went to in Denver, Colorado, 12, 13 years ago. And this is what we use in training our coaches so that all of our planters and hopefully pastors also, that they have a coach. And we just believe in that importance and have seen just how vitally important it is. Keith, it's just an honor, buddy, to have you on here today, and thank you for being a part.
Well, thanks for having me on, and it's been great to see how you've used coaching for yourself personally and also in your system.
Yeah, it has.
Keith, could you mind, as Larry said, he said that you're the...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We may have a little bit of a delay here because of our system.
There is a delay.
Just going to ask Keith, Larry mentioned that that you're the author of the coach model. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about the book, about kind of what you do, just for introduction for our audience, if you would.
Sure. So I come from a missions background. We spent my wife and I, and then had 2 kids there, 10 years in Japan, and we were doing church planting, and then we moved to Indonesia. And it was during my time in Indonesia where I was working as a trainer. It was my ministry. I was training young Indonesians who were from indigenous groups there, who were doing various service projects around in Indonesia as a way of ministering. And this was right after 9/11. And as a trainer, I think I was a pretty good trainer. I was interactive and let people do all this. But when they would sit me down and one-on-one, when we start to talk, I just go into teaching mode with them. I'd tell them what I thought. I'd tell them what I thought they should do in all this. But what I realized is because of it's kind of a hierarchical leadership structure. I was older, had more education, and so on. So they would take whatever I said and they'd go do it, literally, which was great. Finally somebody will listen to me, right? Yeah. And but at that same time, I felt like God say to me, Keith, your advice is going to get somebody killed. Or beaten or arrested. And that kind of stuff happened in our time in Indonesia and after and since then. And what I realized was I needed to have a different approach. And what I realized is I was really good at putting in with people. I could teach and I could advise, I could, mentor, tell them what I've done and this sort of thing. But this idea of drawing out, I didn't have down. And so this is what I started to think about. And I already had been looking into what to do about drawing out, and it was coaching, as asking questions, listening, helping the other person to reflect, helping them to reflect on what God might be saying to them and directing them to do, and helping them think through all that. The problem was I didn't want to do that. I liked my ideas better. I wanted to share my gems with everybody. And so I had to hold back. But that's what got me actually into coaching in the first place. And so that was a huge shift for me, because I'm not naturally wired as a question asker, in dialogues anyway. As question asker, listener, no way. I think about it in my head, and then I spit out good solutions that I just want everybody to go with. I don't know. I don't think I'm alone in that. But that's how I got into coaching, and it revolutionized everything in my ministry. So suddenly, not only did I not feel the burden to come up with answers for everybody and try and put it into their cultural context, right? Remember, I'm very cross-cultural, but I didn't have to do that. But not only that, they started coming up with ideas I'd never thought of. Some that I thought were a bit crazy, but I'd ask them questions to help them reduce the risk a little bit. And they'd go do it, and it was fantastic. All of a sudden I realized I'm drawing out what the Holy Spirit was putting in people. And I'm drawing out, and when I was drawing out by asking questions and listening, I was drawing out from their personality, from their culture, from their giftedness, instead of me imposing what I would do and what I as an American could do, and as a man what I could do, and as you see what I mean? Yeah. Everybody's got their uniqueness. So suddenly I'm drawing out of people's God made uniqueness. And it just changed everything for me.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I really want to speak
Larry,
to that.
where would we go in this conversation? You've been through the course. Yeah.
And I think I am the delay. Yeah, Keith hit it on the head, because when I first went to the training, I know I'm a talker. I'm not a listener by nature. And I know that I'm always ready to tell, and I've got all this stuff I just want to share. But I found out through the training that I could develop good listening skills, and I found out actually it's kind of cool to listen. You really find out some very neat things, and that spiritual dynamic, that when you're coaching, that you realize it's not two of you, but it's three of you. It's you, the coach, the coachee, and the Holy Spirit. That just adds to that spiritual dynamic. And Keith, I'd love for you to talk about how individuals can kind of just start working at listening, and what that looks like, and how that can change their perspective. Because I love that the questions in the workshop on what are the advantages of listening and what are the disadvantages of telling, because I think that's huge.
That's good.
Yeah, well, it's so true. Listening is very underrated.
Yes.
And I mean, how many times have you heard that, that listening is the top thing? No, it's about speaking. Speaking is the top thing. We admire those who speak, who get up and say something and do that sort of thing. But listening, not so much. I mean, I've never commended anyone for what a great listener they were. And maybe that's just me because I'm such an action-oriented guy. But so psychologists have said that listening is the one clear indicator where people feel loved. In other words, if you listen to someone, they feel loved. If you don't listen to someone, guess what? They don't feel loved or cared for. Now, we don't in an organizational or in a business sense, we don't talk about loving our employees very much. That's we don't do that. What we do talk about is showing respect. We talk about engagement. We talk about caring for. We talk about wellness. We talk about health, things like that, right? People feel those things when you are listening to them. And what happens is when you listen to somebody, it's so psychologically what they found out is it's the neurons in your brain. You have the it's firing from neuron to neuron. So where it's firing from in the brain, when you are talking about what you care about, what you think about, it fires in the pleasure center of your brain and gives you, it's in the mesolimbic dopamine system in your brain is what's happening. So what that means is when you listen to someone, you're giving them pleasure. And they're actually feeling it a physical sense. And what happens is when you do that, they like you because of it. They feel respected. They feel in on things. They feel like they're important when you listen to them. And then the opposite is true of all those things as well. When you don't listen to someone, they don't feel like you really, it's not just that you didn't hear them. It's you're not respecting what I'm sharing. You're not caring for me. You're not making me feel valued or important. Things like this. Yeah. And so it's so huge. And I didn't realize this for the longest time. And so now, it's like a little magic trick, actually. Sure. All you got to do is listen to somebody, ask them a few questions, and all of a sudden they think because you do usually, you're curious about them, you care about them, you respect them, and all the things we're trying to manufacture in other ways in our ministry settings happens through listening to people.
Yeah. There's an active piece of shutting yourself down or shutting yourself up so that you can do that, I'm sure. Do you coach some of that aspect as well of kind of how to teach yourself to do that?
Yeah. So, listening's really easy, actually. You just close your mouth.
Right. Just sit there.
And keep it there. The trouble is it's very, very difficult. Yeah. I mean, one of the exercises that we do in our training is we'll ask people to name what are the good listening habits. Yeah. And they can make a list. Great list of good listening habits. And then we say, what are the bad listening habits? They can make a great list. The thing is I can look at those lists that the group makes. I have no additions. I have nothing to add to good listening. I have nothing to add to bad listening. The point is we already know all the info about it, but we don't do it.
Yep.
And so it really comes down to discipline. And it comes down to, it's more than just discipline, but it comes down to curious. It's curious. It's like, I'm curious. What's behind that? What's behind what you're thinking? Mm-hmm. Where would you like to go next in our conversation? What's coming up for you as you think about this? I know what's coming up for me. Mm-hmm. I know what's the thoughts stirring for me, but you get curious and start asking. And I think curiosity actually, Drew, is one of the best antidotes or to not listening is get curious.
Yeah. No, that's good. I don't know what happened to Larry. I think we might have lost him.
Yeah, that's okay. He was having struggles with his internet.
Maybe he'll kick back in. But one thing that's fascinating to me, and you use this word 2 or 3 times, drawing out, and so that I know that's intentional. And I'd love for you just to kind of talk a little bit about that, because what's beautiful, and you alluded to this, is that regardless of culture, regardless of location, you can coach people and talk to them in such a way, in that curiosity that you're talking about, that draws who they are and what they're passionate about. I would love for you to kind of weigh in on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a perceptive question to key in on that one aspect, because it is quite different. So my context is Asia. So I have this Confucius quote that I always think of, and it says Confucius said that a man is not a pot, like a cooking pot.
Right.
And what that really meant is people are not tools to be used. People aren't tools to be used. And yet in our ministries, we're often using people as tools. We need a 5th grade Sunday school teacher. Zero giftedness or calling towards that at all.
Is there a pulse in the audience? Is there a pulse? Is someone with a...
Exactly. That is not drawing out, right?
Right.
We're using people as a tool, and we don't want to do that. And I want to read a verse. I'm going to read it because anytime I try and quote it, I misquote the thing because I'm on the spot here on video.
Right.
But it's from it's from John 14:26, and it says, "But the Counselor, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything I've said to you."
Mm-hmm.
So in this verse, Jesus is saying that the Holy Spirit will teach you all things and remind you of everything I've said to you. But the thing is I think my job is to teach and remind. See, I think that's the input, right? I think my job is to do this. And I was hit over the head by the Holy Spirit with this verse 25 years ago. And it was just like, well, okay, so how do I do that? How do I lead and yet let the Holy Spirit teach and remind?
Yeah.
How do I not take over for the Holy Spirit? I think that's where this drawing out comes from. So for me, theologically, that's where it comes from. Because God's Spirit is working in the other person, whether they're Christian or not, right? God's chasing all of us.
Yeah.
So because God is working, I can get curious, and instead of me assuming that I know for them or that God's telling me for them, which is one way God does work, I get it. But instead of using that as my default or, primary way of working with people, it's asking, what do you think God's directing you to do? What do you think is a good way to go? It's this drawing out function like this. And then what starts to come out is, we spend so much money and time on StrengthsFinder, and you've got your, the 5 love languages. You got all these things you got the DISC and all the personality assessments the whole idea is that everybody's not like you, so stop treating them like you. Right. But yet when we conversationally, when we usually talk with people, because we put in, I'm treating you like me. I'm assuming that you have the same problem I do, and that the solution I had will work for you. It's Stephen Covey's old example of, hey, I see very clear with these glasses. Here, they're going to work for you. Put them on. These will work for you. And of course, you put on somebody else's glasses, and it doesn't work for them.
No.
Why? Because they need their own glasses.
Yeah.
And so I think that this drawing out allows people to be putting on their own glasses and also tapping into, even if they're not tapping into what God's saying, eventually they start reflecting deep enough that they start to tap into that, right?
Right. That's fascinating. I'm just sitting here thinking, so you're kind of operating as a guide to what God is already doing in their heart, what he's already spoken to them. And I'm even thinking back on the comment you made about listening things and that you wouldn't add to it. It's like you're not really adding here as much as going, hey, what has God already said? What do you know to be true? What do you not do? You're just helping them think about the things that God has already spoken to them and reminded them of. And that's really interesting.
And in that process, though, it also starts prompting for you end up prompting for what they're not aware of.
Yeah.
And because one of the things about people, and it happened when I was, I was going to write another book, and I was teaching on the topic a lot. So I thought, I know what I'm going to do. This will be genius. I am going to record myself teaching on the topic. I'm going to send it out to a transcription. I'm going to get the transcript back. I'm going to edit it. Boom, book's done. Finally, years I've been wanting to write it. I'm going to have it done. So I do this, send it out, get it back. I'm looking at it all excited, and it's almost incomprehensible. It's just like, what? It's like, do I talk like this? And I start reading it out loud, and I'm like, yeah, I do talk like that. And so what I learned from that was, one is I don't write, or I don't speak in like full paragraphs, right?
Yeah.
But what I learned is in your mind, you're totally clear until you have to explain it. So when somebody asks you a question to start to ask you what's going on, I just want to live out my calling, they said.
Yeah.
So, what is your understanding of your calling? You ask, right? They go,
Right.
it's to serve God, and I want to just serve God and just serve Him, right? They don't understand what their calling is.
Right.
They're
Totally.
just using the same words and waving their hands around.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what they're really, but if you had asked them before you said anything, how clear are you on your calling? Oh yeah, I like 80%. I'm there. Then you get them to explain it, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I'm not clear at all. And I rate it like 30%. And then you get them to write it down, and then it's like, oh my goodness, I can't write it down, right? And so this is how people are. And so this is why it's like, so people don't get it, that they think, well, how could Keith help me? He doesn't know anything about my context like this, because I'm asking processing reflective questions.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you content.
Right. Right.
And,
That's
and
brilliant.
then all of a sudden it starts highlighting what you do know, and it also starts highlighting what you don't know. And then we start exploring what you don't know.
Okay.
And you start gaining new awareness around that. And then, of course, you can, come up with experiments or action steps or whatever to take it even further.
Yeah. Okay, so as we mentioned before, so our audience are pastors, church
Yes.
leaders, people who work in the church. Obviously, as I think about you, I think about what you teach and what you do is so important when I think about elder training, and I think about maybe a church's Sunday school team or staff, or what, as you think about the folks that are listening to this, succinctly give us sort of an idea of where we can start with some of these techniques and some of these ideas, maybe that are in the book or that you would suggest.
Where do we start? So I think the first is to get your head around what it is we're talking about.
Okay.
So people come to we do a lot of training. We're one of the larger Christian organizations training in these coaching communication skills. And we get a lot of people who come, and a lot of them think they're missing information. So it's not information. You are missing information maybe, and I'm still learning new information too. But where people, it's skills. So listening is actually a skill set. Asking questions and there's lots of different kinds of questions or questions for different purposes. These are skills. And then how you move someone to get them into action. How do you help nurture their insights they have without telling them what your insight was?
Sure.
Is a skill. These are all skills. So somehow or another, you have to begin to learn what that skill is, and then you have to practice that skill.
Okay.
And then in that practice, you actually need feedback. So there was a Harvard Business Review study of a company, and what they did was they had the managers do a coaching conversation with an employee, and they taped it. And then they played it back to the manager and the employee and had them rate the manager's coaching ability. And then they had a professional coach listen to it. Huge gap.
Wow.
The professional coach said, "No way, this is not it was just micromanaging. It was just telling them." Wow. They'd ask a little bit and then tell them. And so then what they did was they gave them a little bit of training on asking questions, listening, how to do this process. Gave them a little bit of training, and by a little bit, I think they said it was either 10 or 12 hours of training like that. And then they had the manager do another coaching thing and listen to it, and it was much improved.
Wow.
And then the coach's evaluation of their own recording went down, right? And the professional coach's evaluation went up, and then the manager coaching, theirs went more realistic.
Right. Exactly.
The point is that there's a lot of people out there who've experienced something called coaching, but it's not really coaching like we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways is to get some sort of short training, if you can do that. So another way is, so I have my book, and you mentioned you guys were going to put it in the show notes here. Yep. The Coach Model for Christian Leaders. You can find it on Amazon. It's a popular book on the topic. It's skill focused, and so you're going to read it, so you still have to oh, okay, how would I do that? And you can go after it. But then we offer short trainings. I think Larry has a short training as well. That you're doing that, aren't you, Larry?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so there, it's there, and so that's how people can get into it. And then I think what happens is once you do a short training, and I mean I'm only talking about something it could be. I'm not talking about an hour and a half. Hour and a half is just kind of what are we talking about?
Right. Sure.
Although we do one, we have a free hour and a half training. If you go to our website, you can come to that. That's great. It'll give you a real taste and see. But you gotta get a good 10, 12, 14 hours in there before you can actually start to see a little bit of behavioral change. And then from there, if you want to do more, you can do more.
Okay. No, that's awesome. Larry, you've been in and out a little bit because of your signal, but what would you add to this, or how would you, anything specific that you wanted Keith to address?
Well, Drew, you kicked me off, and I know you did that, and so I just want to come out in the open, okay?
Come on.
That's what happened. But I would say this to Keith. I love the actual coach model, and I still have my coaching cards. I don't have to use them anymore. But when I left the first training, I called a very good friend who I could name, and this is what I loved about this, because he's talking about skill sets. And I said, hey, I'm going to use my coach card. Would you let me practice? And he said, absolutely. So could you talk just a little bit about the COACH?
Yeah, that's great, Larry. Let me show just to see what Larry's talking about. So it's this model. It's a 5-step model for how to have what I would call an empowering or a good conversation. It's also a coaching conversation, but you can do it in anything. It starts with connecting with the person, how you doing, things like that. But then the surprising next step is surprising. It's you ask, what is it they want to work on? You find out at the beginning, where is it you want to get to by the end of our conversation? So you don't just meander around in the conversation and hope you hit on something important. Yeah. You're asking the other person up front what they want. And it's not what I think they need, but it's what do you think you need? You see the drawing out?
Right, exactly.
And then you go in and explore that with awareness, and that's the bulk of the conversation. And then from there, you go to course, which is action steps. It's like, so Drew, given what we've talked about today, what actions could you take to move forward in that, right? So I prompt for, I'm drawing out actions. I don't give you homework. I draw out the homework, right? And then the last one is highlights. And that is, what are you taking away from our conversation today? Like that. And then once they go out, they do their action steps and come back. Inside of Connect, you're asking, how are you? And you're also checking up on, not for accountability, but for learning, which is, what progress did you make on your action steps?
Right.
Right. And then from there you go, what would you like to talk about or work on today?
Yeah.
And then we work on it, and then more action steps, highlights, and out, like that. And that outline there, people have found very helpful in having a conversation that's other person focused and drawing out. So very empowering in that.
No, it's very good. And the thing that keeps coming to my mind is there's an axiom in business and leadership that is, leadership is caring for the people under your responsibility, or whatever the case may be. Oftentimes people think leadership is just being in charge or having the power or making the most money in the company or something. But godly leadership is truly caring for the people that you have in your responsibility and leading them to be the best that they can be. And that's what I sense in what you're saying. In this kind of model, it's not just about what you can get them to do for you. It's about drawing out of them the best that they can be and you helping shape that. And that's what I sense from what you're saying. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, that is the, yes, it does do that. And so here's the thing. I mean, I don't think anybody in your audience would disagree with that's what they're trying to do, or that's what, that's their intention. And we all want to be servant leaders. But the rub is, what's the conversation you have to be a servant leader when that person comes into your office? What is that conversation? How does that conversation go? And most of us, what we default to is, oh, that means I'm going to tell them something. I'm going to do something for them. I'm going to encourage them, which, see that way the hand's going? I'm going to encourage them like this. Whereas, which means I'm going to say something to them. I'm going to say, oh, Drew, you're a good guy. You'll make it through this. You know, I'm going to cheerlead for them. It's not that those things are bad. It's that they're not as, I don't think they're as empowering or as caring as when we start doing this drawing out function. When we start doing that, people feel very encouraged. They feel very cared for. But you didn't tell them. And I don't know about you, but I've had many times where I have both received somebody's helpful, they're trying to be helpful for me, and it was not helpful at all. It was discouraging. And then, of course, I've done that to other people. So, it's a helpful way to lead. One more thing I would say on that is, I'm not suggesting that as leaders, we suddenly shift from everything from where we used to put in, we now only draw out. It's not an only. To be a leader, you have to have a variety of tools in how you work with people, to use those tools in different situations. And it's even with the same person. It's Hershey Blanchard's old situational leadership grid. It's the same person, but a different topic. You might be more directive with one topic than you are with another topic where you're pulling out more, right? And so it's not an either or. You're using both. And most people are lopsided on, I just know how to tell. I just know how to advise, put in, teach, preach, like that. They don't know the draw out.
Yeah, so good. Larry, this has been a great podcast. You should download it and
listen.
listen to it.
Yeah, I know,
I'm just
guys.
playing with you. What?
There is something I want to say to what Keith just said.
Okay.
Because it's huge. I tell our guys all the time, and I've even adapted it a little, but I love that Keith is stressing it's not an either or. Because I tell all my guys, you need 5 people in your life. You need a friend, you need a pastor, you need a coach, you need a mentor, and you need an accountability guy. And a lot of times, that's not necessarily 5 persons. Keith said it well. It can be 5 different roles at different times. Now, some of those don't mesh well. The accountability and the coach guy, they kind of need to be different people. For example, the guys that are church planners for me, they see me as their supervisor. So I want them to have a coach besides me. But I love how Keith stressed in different situations. And y'all's humor's about to get on my nerves because I am going to download it and I'll listen to it later.
Yes. Well, sorry for the trouble here, Larry, and the internet weirdness, but it's been great. Keith, we're so grateful for your time and all the things you said. I think are wonderful. And if nothing else, we want to move people to the website so that they can see the hour and a half piece. Would you mind sharing the website now with us? What is
Yeah, so our organization is called Creative Results Management. And so the URL is creativeresultsmanagement.com. And so if they go there, they'll find the link for the 90-minute workshop, and they'll probably find a link. And you find the book on Amazon. You can look up Keith Webb, get it that way. You can buy it from us, too. We'll give you a free study guide, that kind of thing. Anyway, thank you so much for having me on today. It's good to chat with you.
Good to chat with you. Sorry for the trouble with Larry, but man, it's been wonderful, and I've really appreciated all that you had to say. And I know this will be helpful for the folks that are listening. So thank you so much for the time. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Healthy Church Podcast. If we can help you, please email us, info@healthychurchpodcast.com. For any suggestions, ideas, or if we can help lead you to some of these resources, we'd be happy to do that as well. God bless you. We'll talk to you next time on the podcast.
For more information and other resources, go to healthychurchpodcast.com.